The Hollow Prince's Doom. Briarvex had always known there were places she was not meant to go. But when she stepped into the ruins of Black Hollow, the torches lit themselves. The air thickened. The carvings in the stone shifted beneath her fingertips. And then, from the darkness, a voice low, rich, edged with something ancient. "You woke me," he murmured, stepping forward, golden eyes gleaming. "And now you're mine." Chapter 1. The Whispers of Black Hollow. The crisp October air nipped at Briarvex's cheeks, carrying the scent of decaying leaves and damp earth. At 62, she felt the chill more keenly than she used to, a subtle reminder of the years that had slipped by, leaving behind a quiet ache in her bones and a deeper one in her heart. She adjusted the worn leather satchel slung across her shoulder, its weight familiar and comforting, filled with the tools of her solitary trade, sketching pencils, charcoal, and the thick, cream-colored paper she favored for capturing the fleeting beauty of the world around her. Briar had always been drawn to the forgotten corners of the world, the places where the veil between the present and the past felt thin, almost transparent. Today, that yearning had led her to the outskirts of Whispering Pines, a small, secluded town nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains, and to the foot of Black Hollow, a place shrouded in local legend and whispered warnings. "Don't go near the hollow." Briar, Martha, the owner of the town's only bookstore and Briar's closest confidant since her arrival a month ago, had cautioned. "Bad things happen there. They say it's cursed." Briar, a woman who had learned to trust her instincts more than the anxieties of others, had merely smiled, a flicker of something akin to defiance in her hazel eyes. Curses were stories, weren't they? Ways to explain the unexplainable, to give shape to the shadows that lurked in the human heart. She'd seen enough real darkness in her life to be overly concerned with the superstitious kind. The path leading into the hollow was overgrown, the stones worn smooth by time and weather. Twisted branches, gnarled like arthritic fingers, reached out from the ancient oaks, their leaves a tapestry of crimson and gold, rustling with a sound that seemed to mimic hushed voices. Briar paused, her hand resting on the rough bark of a tree, its surface cool and damp beneath her touch. There was a stillness here, a profound sense of waiting, that sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More like a heightened awareness, a feeling of being watched, of being recognized. She continued her ascent, the trees closing in around her, the sunlight filtering through the canopy in fractured beams. The air grew noticeably colder, and a faint mist began to swirl around her ankles, clinging to her wool skirt and the sturdy leather boots she wore. The silence deepened, broken only by the occasional caw of a raven overhead and the soft crunch of her boots on the leaf-strewn path. Ahead, through the swirling mist, she glimpsed the ruins. Black Hollow wasn't a hollow in the traditional sense, but rather the remnants of a once grand structure, perhaps a cathedral or a monastery, built from dark, volcanic stone that seemed to absorb the light. Time and nature had taken their toll, leaving behind crumbling walls, shattered archways, and a sense of profound desolation. As Briar stepped through a broken archway, the air thickened, pressing against her chest with a palpable weight. She stumbled, her hand reaching out to steady herself against a cold, stone wall. And then she saw it, a faint, flickering light, emanating from deep within the ruins. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat, drawing her closer. She moved towards the light, her heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. As she rounded a crumbling corner, she saw the source. Torches, set in sconces along the walls, had sprung to life, their flames burning with an unnatural, ethereal glow. The air shimmered around them, distorting the shadows, making the carvings on the walls seem to shift and writhe. Briar stared, mesmerized. She hadn't lit them. She hadn't seen anyone else. The torches had ignited themselves. It was impossible, illogical, and yet undeniably real. She reached out a tentative hand, her fingers brushing against the surface of a nearby carving. The stone was cold, yet the images beneath her fingertips seemed to pulse with a strange, inner warmth. She traced the outline of a wolf, its head thrown back in a silent howl, its eyes strangely knowing. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to steady herself. When she opened them again, the carvings seemed to have settled, becoming once more inanimate stone. But the feeling of being watched persisted, stronger now, more focused. And then, from the darkness at the far end of the ruined chamber, a voice spoke. Low, rich, edged with something ancient and weary. "You woke me," he murmured. Briar's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't see him clearly, only a silhouette against the flickering torchlight, tall and imposing, radiating an aura of power that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. He took a step forward, and the light caught his face. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, a mouth that looked both cruel and vulnerable. But it was his eyes that held her captive. They were the color of molten gold, luminous in the dim light, and filled with an intensity that seemed to pierce through her, stripping away her defenses, her carefully constructed walls. "And now," he continued, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very stones beneath her feet, "you are mine." His words, spoken with such quiet certainty, such possessiveness, should have terrified her. And yet, beneath the tremor of fear that ran through her, there was something else. A flicker of recognition, a strange sense of inevitability. As if this moment, this encounter, had been written in the stars long ago. As if she had been waiting for him, without even knowing it. He stepped closer, and with a shiver that traced a cold finger down her spine, Briar knew that her life, the quiet, solitary existence she had so carefully cultivated, was about to change forever. She had a choice whether she understood all that was at play or not. Flee or be claimed. Chapter 2. A Light in the Ruins. Briar stood frozen, the weight of his gaze heavy upon her. The golden light of his eyes seemed to hold the ancient secrets of the ruins, the weight of centuries, and a deep, unsettling loneliness. He was beautiful, in a way that was both captivating and terrifying. The kind of beauty that could make a woman forget herself, forget the world, forget everything but the desire to be consumed by it. She forced herself to take a breath, the cold air burning in her lungs.
"Mine?"
she echoed, her voice a shaky whisper that barely carried across the ruined chamber. "I belong to no one." A flicker of something amusement?
Surprise?
Crossed his features. He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost unnatural, as if he were gliding rather than walking. He was dressed in clothes that looked both ancient and strangely timeless, a dark, heavy coat that reached his knees, trousers of a similar material, and boots that seemed to be made of the same dark stone as the ruins themselves. "You came here," he said, his voice closer now, the sound sending shivers down her spine. "You disturbed my slumber. You lit the torches." Briar shook her head, a strand of her silver-streaked brown hair escaping its loose braid. I didn't light them. They lit themselves." He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough that she could feel the subtle heat radiating from his body, smell the faint, earthy scent that clung to him, a mixture of stone and rain and something wilder, something animalistic. "Impossible," he murmured, but his eyes, those mesmerizing golden eyes, betrayed a flicker of doubt. He reached out a hand, his fingers long and elegant, and traced the outline of one of the torches. The flame danced, as if responding to his touch. "This place, it responds to me," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "It has always responded to me. But you are different." He turned his gaze back to her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Who are you?" Briar swallowed, trying to find her voice, to regain some semblance of composure.
I'm Briar Vex.
"I'm an artist. I came here to sketch the ruins." He raised an eyebrow, a hint of skepticism in his expression. "An artist? Drawn to a place of darkness and decay?" "I'm drawn to beauty," Briar corrected, her voice gaining a little strength. "Even in decay, there can be beauty." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. Then, a slow smile spread across his face, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Perhaps, he conceded. Perhaps you are right. He took another step closer, and Briar instinctively recoiled, her back pressing against the cold stone wall. He stopped, his smile fading. Don't be afraid, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. I won't hurt you. But Briar wasn't so sure. There was something dangerous about him, something untamed, that sent a primal fear coursing through her veins. And yet there was also something compelling. A loneliness that mirrored her own, a sadness that resonated deep within her soul. What is this place? She asked, her voice still trembling. He gestured around them, at the crumbling walls, the shattered archways, the flickering torches. This was my home.
Once.
A long time ago. What happened here? He hesitated, his gaze drifting away, as if lost in the memories of a distant past. A tragedy, he said finally, his voice heavy with unspoken grief. A betrayal. A curse. Briar felt a chill run down her spine. The word curse echoed the warnings she had heard in town, the whispers of bad things, of a place to be avoided. What kind of curse? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked back at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and something else. Something that looked almost like hope. A curse of loneliness, he said. A curse of isolation. A curse that you may have broken. He reached out a hand, his fingers brushing against hers. The contact sent a jolt of energy through her, a strange, tingling sensation that made her breath catch in her throat. His touch was warm, surprisingly so, given the coldness of the ruins. Stay, he said, his voice a low, seductive murmur. Stay with me. Briar looked into his eyes, and for a moment, she was lost. Lost in the depths of his gaze, in the promise of something she couldn't quite name, something that both terrified and exhilarated her. She felt a pull, a connection to him, that defied logic, that defied reason. But then, the fear returned, the ingrained caution that had kept her safe, kept her solitary, for so many years. She pulled her hand away, her heart pounding in her chest. I can't, she said, her voice shaking. I have to go. His expression shifted, the hope fading, replaced by a shadow of disappointment, of resignation. He stepped back, allowing her to pass. Briar hesitated, her gaze lingering on him for a moment longer. She wanted to ask him more, to understand the mystery that surrounded him, the curse that bound him to this place. But the fear, the instinct for self-preservation, was too strong. She turned and fled, running through the ruins, back towards the path that led to Whispering Pines, back towards the world she knew, the world she thought was safe. But as she ran, she could still feel his eyes on her, the weight of his gaze, the echo of his words. You are mine. And a part of her, a small, reckless part, wondered if he was right. The world outside seemed duller, the colors less vibrant. Had she truly escaped? Or had she simply delayed the inevitable? Chapter 3. The Prince's Claim. Briar didn't stop running until she reached the edge of the woods, stumbling out onto the main road that led back to Whispering Pines. She leaned against a weathered fence post, gasping for breath, her heart still pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the road, painting the landscape in hues of orange and purple. But the beauty of the scene did little to calm the turmoil within her. She looked back towards Black Hollow, the dark silhouette of the ruins barely visible through the trees. It seemed impossible that such a place could exist, so close to the quaint, sleepy town she had come to think of as a refuge. A place of ancient magic, of curses and of him. The memory of his golden eyes, his touch, his voice, sent a shiver down her spine. He was dangerous, she knew that instinctively. But there was also something undeniably magnetic about him, something that drew her in, despite her fear. She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She needed to be rational, to think clearly. She was an artist, a woman of reason, not a character in some gothic romance novel. She had imagined him, hadn't she? A figment of her overactive imagination, fueled by the local legends and the eerie atmosphere of the ruins. but the torches, the way they had lit themselves, the feeling of his hand on hers that had been real. Undeniably real. She pushed herself away from the fence post, her legs still shaky. She needed to get back to her small cottage on the outskirts of town, to the safety of her familiar surroundings. She needed a cup of strong tea, a warm fire, and the comforting weight of her sketchbook in her lap. As she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She glanced over her shoulder several times, but saw nothing but the empty road and the encroaching shadows of the trees. Still, the sensation persisted, a prickling on the back of her neck, a whisper of unease that followed her all the way home. Her cottage was small, but cozy, with whitewashed walls, a stone fireplace, and large windows that looked out onto a small, overgrown garden. She had found it abandoned and in disrepair, and had spent the past month restoring it, finding solace in the simple act of bringing something beautiful back to life. She lit the fire, the flames quickly chasing away the chill that had settled in her bones. She made a pot of Earl Grey tea, the fragrant steam filling the small kitchen with a comforting aroma. She sat down at her worn wooden table, her sketchbook open in front of her, a blank page staring back at her. But she couldn't draw. Her hand hovered over the page, her mind still racing, filled with images of the ruins, of the golden-eyed man, of the curse he had spoken of. She tried to sketch his face, but her hand trembled, the lines coming out shaky and uncertain. She couldn't capture the intensity of his gaze, the subtle nuances of his expression, the aura of power and vulnerability that surrounded him. Frustrated, she closed her sketchbook, pushing it away from her. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug of tea, trying to find some comfort in the familiar ritual. But even the tea couldn't soothe the unease that had settled deep within her. The sound of a knock on the door startled her, making her jump. She hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. Who could be visiting her at this hour? It was almost dark. She cautiously approached the door, peering through the small, curtained window. She couldn't see anyone. She hesitated for a moment longer, then slowly opened the door, her hand gripping the edge of the frame. He stood on her doorstep, bathed in the soft glow of the porch light. The same man from the ruins. He looked even more striking in the mundane setting of her cottage, his presence somehow out of place, yet undeniably real. "You," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. He smiled, that same slow, enigmatic smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "You didn't think you could escape me so easily, did you? How did you find me?" He gestured vaguely with his hand. "I have ways. This town is small. And you left a trail." Briar frowned, confused. "A trail?" He reached out and gently touched a strand of her hair, the one that had come loose from her braid. "Your scent," he said, his voice low and intimate. "It's unique. Like wildflowers and wood smoke." "I followed it." Briar's cheeks flushed. She hadn't realized, she hadn't thought. She stepped back, putting some distance between them. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "I told you," he said, his golden eyes fixed on hers. "You woke me. You belong to me now." "I don't belong to anyone," Briar repeated, her voice firmer this time, fueled by a surge of defiance. "I am not yours. I am not anyone's." He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the air. "We shall see, Briar Vex. We shall see." He took a step forward, crossing the threshold into her cottage. "The curse it binds us together, whether you like it or not." The scent of him, that earthy, wild scent, filled her small cottage, making it feel even smaller, making her feel smaller. He didn't seem threatening, not physically, but the power he exuded was undeniable, a palpable force that pressed against her. She needed to think, to find a way out of this, but her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and feared, and something else. Something she didn't want to acknowledge, a flicker of fascination, of attraction. He moved closer, his eyes holding hers. And in that moment, something shifted. Chapter 4. Echoes of a Forgotten Past. He moved with a deliberate slowness, giving her ample opportunity to retreat further into the cottage. But Briar found herself rooted to the spot, her gaze locked with his. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls, mirroring the turbulent emotions swirling within her. The curse, he continued, his voice a low murmur that seemed to wrap around her, is not merely a punishment. It's a connection. A bond. Briar frowned, trying to make sense of his words.
A bond?
What kind of bond? He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers surprisingly warm against her skin. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her, a strange, tingling sensation that made her breath catch in her throat. A soul bond, he said, his golden eyes searching hers. A connection between two souls, forged in tragedy and magic. Briar's heart skipped a beat. A soul bond? She had read about them, of course, in ancient texts and folklore, dismissed them as fanciful tales, the stuff of legends. But here he stood, in her small, ordinary cottage, speaking of them as if they were real. I don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. He smiled, a sad, wistful smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I didn't expect you to. It's a long story. A story that spans centuries. He moved past her, towards the fireplace, his gaze drawn to the flickering flames. He seemed to be studying them, lost in thought, as if the fire held some secret, some clue to his past. Tell me, Briar said, her voice stronger now, fueled by a growing curiosity. Tell me the story. He turned back to her, his expression softening. Are you sure you want to hear it? It's not a happy tale. Briar nodded. I need to understand. I need to know why you think I'm bound to you. He hesitated for a moment longer, then nodded. Very well. But it's a long story, and it's best told sitting down. He gestured towards the two armchairs that flanked the fireplace. Briar hesitated, then slowly walked towards one of them, sinking into its worn cushions. He sat down opposite her, his gaze never leaving hers. He began to speak, his voice low and resonant, filling the small room with the echoes of a forgotten past. He spoke of a time long ago when Black Hollow was not a ruin, but a thriving community, a place of magic and power. He spoke of his people, the Lycans, beings who could shift between human and wolf form, blessed or cursed, depending on one's perspective, with a connection to the moon and the earth. He spoke of his own lineage, of a royal family that had ruled Black Hollow for generations, protectors of the land and its people. He spoke of his own name, Alaric, Prince of the Silverwood, heir to the throne. He spoke of a love, a forbidden love, between himself and a woman from a rival clan, a clan that practiced a different kind of magic, a darker, more volatile magic. He spoke of their secret meetings, their stolen moments, their desperate hope for a future together. He spoke of a betrayal, a plot by his own brother, driven by jealousy and ambition, to seize the throne and destroy the woman Alaric loved. He spoke of a ritual, a dark and twisted ritual, that went horribly wrong, unleashing a powerful curse that consumed Black Hollow, turning it into the desolate ruin it was today. He spoke of his own transformation, not into a wolf, but into something else. Something trapped between worlds, neither fully human nor fully wolf, bound to the ruins, to the memory of his lost love. He spoke of centuries of loneliness, of isolation, of watching the world change, while he remained frozen in time, a prisoner of his own grief and the curse that bound him. As he spoke, Briar listened mesmerized. His story was fantastical, unbelievable, and yet she believed him. She could see the truth in his eyes, the pain, the regret, the centuries of sorrow that weighed heavily upon him. She also saw another detail. Alaric was wearing a ring. On his left hand, a silver band, inset with a dark, almost black stone. The ring seemed to pulsate with the same faint, ethereal light that lit the torches, and the recognition hit Briar like a physical blow. The curse, Alaric continued, his voice growing fainter, as if the telling of his story was draining him, was meant to be eternal. But there was a loophole, a prophecy, a chance for redemption. He looked at Briar, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of hope and desperation. The prophecy spoke of a woman with a connection to the earth, a woman with a spirit strong enough to break the curse. A woman who would awaken me. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. His touch was warm, grounding, and yet it sent a shiver of unease through her. You, Briar, he said, his voice a low, husky whisper. You are the woman in the prophecy. You are the one who can set me free. His grip tightened on her hand, not painfully, but possessively. It was a claim, a declaration, and a plea, all wrapped into one. The fire crackled, the only sound in the room besides their breathing, and the weight of his words, his past, his hope, settled heavily upon her. What had she stumbled into? Chapter 5. The Curse Unveiled. Briar stared at him, her mind reeling. She, the woman in the prophecy? It seemed impossible, absurd. She was just an ordinary woman, an artist, a widow who had sought solace in a quiet, solitary life. She had no magic, no special powers, no connection to anything beyond the tangible world. I don't understand, she stammered, pulling her hand away from his. I'm not anyone special. I'm just me. Alaric's expression softened, a flicker of understanding in his golden eyes. You may not see it, Briar, he said gently, but you are. You have a strength within you, a resilience, a connection to the earth that resonates with the magic of this place. He gestured towards the window, towards the dark silhouette of Black Hollow in the distance. You were drawn here, weren't you? You felt the pull, the calling. Briar nodded slowly, remembering the strange sense of inevitability that had led her to the ruins, the feeling of being watched, of being recognized. The prophecy, Alaric continued, spoke of a woman who would come to Black Hollow, a woman who would light the torches, a woman who would awaken the sleeping prince. But I didn't light the torches, Briar protested. They lit themselves. Alaric smiled, a faint, enigmatic smile. Perhaps. Or perhaps your presence triggered something. A spark of magic, dormant for centuries, waiting for the right moment, the right soul. He reached out and touched the silver ring on his left hand, the ring with the dark, almost black stone. This ring, he said, is a key part of the curse. It's a conduit, a link between me and the magic of Black Hollow. He took a deep breath, his gaze locking with hers. The curse, as it was originally cast, was meant to trap me here forever, in a state of perpetual twilight, neither fully alive nor fully dead. But my love, Alara, she altered it. Before she died, she used her own magic to weave a thread of hope into the curse. His voice cracked with emotion, and Briar felt a pang of sympathy for him, for the pain he had carried for so long. She created a loophole, he continued, his voice regaining its strength. A way for the curse to be broken. She bound her soul to mine, through this ring, and she prophesied that one day, a woman with a similar spirit, a woman with a connection to the earth and a love strong enough to overcome the darkness, would come and set us both free. He looked at Briar, his golden eyes filled with a fervent intensity. You, Briar, you are that woman. You have the power to break the curse, to release me from this prison. Briar shook her head, overwhelmed by the weight of his words, by the sheer impossibility of it all. But how? What am I supposed to do? Alaric leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. The curse is tied to the ring, he said, and to Black Hollow itself. To break it, we need to sever the connection. We need to perform a ritual that will release the trapped magic and allow my soul, and Alara's, to finally find peace. A ritual? Briar repeated, her voice laced with apprehension. What kind of ritual? Alaric hesitated, his expression shifting, a shadow of uncertainty crossing his features. It's complicated. It requires ingredients. And a sacrifice. Briar's heart skipped a beat. A sacrifice? What kind of sacrifice? He looked away, avoiding her gaze. The ritual requires a willing heart. A soul that is willing to merge with the magic of the ring, to absorb the darkness and transform it. Briar felt a chill run down her spine. His words were vague, deliberately so, but the implication was clear. The ritual required a life. Her life. You're saying I have to die?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Alaric looked back at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "Not die, exactly," he said, his voice softer now. "More like a transformation. A merging. Your essence, your spirit, would become part of the ring, part of the magic, freeing me and Ilara in the process." He reached out and took her hand again, his fingers intertwining with hers. His touch was warm, comforting, and yet terrifying. "I know it's a lot to ask," he said, his voice a low, persuasive murmur. "But it's the only way. And I believe it's what you were meant to do." Briar stared at him, her mind in turmoil. She was being asked to sacrifice her life, her future, for a man she barely knew, for a curse she didn't understand. It was madness, insane. And yet there was a part of her, a small, reckless part, that was drawn to the idea. A part of her that felt a connection to him, to Ilara, to the tragedy of Black Hollow. A part of her that wanted to help. I need time," she said, her voice shaking. "I need time to think." Alaric nodded slowly, his gaze understanding. "Of course. I understand. But time is not something we have in abundance. The curse, it's growing stronger. The veil between worlds is thinning. And there are others who would seek to exploit the power of Black Hollow." He released her hand, but the weight of his gaze remained. The unspoken threat, the urgency, hung heavy in the air, a silent pressure that pushed her towards a decision she wasn't ready to make. The fire crackled, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mimic the swirling chaos of her thoughts. Was she truly the key to his freedom? Or was she merely a pawn in a game far older and more dangerous than she could comprehend? Chapter 6. Bonds of Shadow and Light. Alaric stood, the firelight playing across his features, highlighting the sharp angles of his face and the intensity of his golden eyes. He moved with a quiet grace, a predator's awareness, even within the confines of the small cottage. "I will leave you to your thoughts," he said, his voice low and resonant. "But know this, Briar Vex, the choice is yours, but the consequences are far-reaching." He turned to leave, pausing at the door. He looked back at her, his expression unreadable. "The moon is full tonight," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "It is a time of power, a time of transition. I will be at Black Hollow. If you choose to help me, you know where to find me." And then, he was gone, disappearing into the night as silently as he had arrived. Briar sat there for a long time, staring at the closed door, the echo of his words, his presence, still lingering in the air. She felt drained, emotionally and physically exhausted. The weight of his story, his request, pressed down on her, making it difficult to breathe. She got up and went to the window, looking out at the full moon, its silvery light bathing the landscape in an ethereal glow. It was beautiful, undeniably so, but it also felt ominous. A reminder of the supernatural forces that had suddenly intruded upon her quiet, ordinary life. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the chill that had settled deep within her. She needed to think, to make sense of it all, but her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Fear, doubt, confusion, and a strange, undeniable pull towards Alaric, towards Black Hollow, towards the mystery that surrounded them both. She thought of her late husband, Thomas. He had been a practical man, a scientist, a man who believed in logic and reason. He would have scoffed at the idea of curses and soul bonds, of werewolves and ancient prophecies. He would have told her to run, to get as far away from Alaric and Black Hollow as possible. But Thomas was gone. He had died 5 years ago, after a long illness, leaving Briar alone, adrift in a world that no longer made sense. She had come to Whispering Pines seeking solace, seeking a place to heal, to rebuild her life. And now this. She thought of Martha, her friend in town. She wanted to talk to her, to confide in her, to seek her advice. But she knew, instinctively, that she couldn't. Martha wouldn't understand. She would think Briar had lost her mind. She would try to convince her to leave, to go to the authorities. And Briar couldn't do that. Not yet. She needed to understand, to see for herself if what Alaric had told her was true. She needed to know if she really did have the power to break the curse, to set him free. She went to her sketchbook, flipping through the pages, her gaze drawn to the unfinished sketches of Alaric, of the ruins, of the wolf carvings she had seen. She picked up a pencil, her hand trembling slightly, and began to draw. She drew the ring, the silver band with the dark stone, trying to capture the faint, ethereal glow that emanated from it. She drew Alaric's face, his golden eyes, his expression of both sorrow and hope. She drew the ruins of Black Hollow, bathed in the moonlight, the shadows stretching long and ominous. As she drew, she felt a strange sense of connection. A connection to Alaric, to the ring, to the magic of Black Hollow. It was as if, through her art, she was tapping into something ancient, something powerful, something real. She drew for hours, losing herself in the process, the outside world fading away. The fire in the hearth died down, the embers glowing a dull red, the only light in the room besides the moonlight streaming through the window. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky with hues of pink and orange, Briar finally put down her pencil. She looked at the finished drawing, a complex, intricate image that seemed to capture the essence of Alaric, of the curse, of the bond that connected them. And in that moment, she knew what she had to do. She couldn't explain it, couldn't justify it, but she knew, deep in her heart, that she had to go back to Black Hollow. She had to see Alaric again. She had to help him. She was afraid, terrified, but there was also a sense of purpose. A feeling that she had been waiting for this moment, for this challenge, her entire life. As if all the paths she had taken, all the losses she had endured, had led her here, to this place, to this decision. She got up, her legs stiff from sitting for so long. She changed her clothes, putting on the sturdy boots and wool skirt she had worn the previous day. She packed a small bag, putting in her sketchbook, her pencils, a bottle of water, and a piece of bread. She looked around the cottage, at the familiar objects that had become so dear to her, the symbols of the quiet, solitary life she had built for herself. She wondered if she would ever see them again. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She opened the door and stepped out into the dawn, the cool air crisp against her face. She looked towards Black Hollow, the ruins silhouetted against the rising sun. And she began to walk, her heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs, a mixture of fear and anticipation coursing through her veins. The path was familiar now, yet different. She was different. Chapter 7. The Town of Whispering Pines. Before heading to Black Hollow, Briar felt a compulsion, a need to anchor herself to the normalcy she might be leaving behind. She walked into Whispering Pines, the town still sleepy in the early morning light. The quaint main street, lined with small shops and Victorian-era houses, was just beginning to stir. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted from the bakery, a comforting aroma that usually drew her in. But today, she walked past, her mind preoccupied with the task ahead. She needed to see Martha, to say something. She didn't know what, exactly, but she couldn't just disappear without a word. Martha's bookstore, the Book Nook, was nestled between the bakery and a small antique shop. Its windows were filled with displays of books, their colorful covers promising escape and adventure. Briar had spent many hours browsing the shelves, finding solace in the stories, in the company of Martha, a kind, intelligent woman who had become a friend. She pushed open the door, a small bell jingling above her head. Martha was behind the counter, arranging a stack of new arrivals. She looked up, her face breaking into a warm smile. Briar, good morning. You're up early. Briar managed a weak smile in return. I needed some air. Martha studied her for a moment, her brow furrowing slightly. You look pale. Are you feeling all right? Briar hesitated. She wanted to tell her everything, to confide in her, to seek her advice. But she knew she couldn't. Martha wouldn't understand. She would think Briar had lost her mind. I'm just a little tired, Briar said, forcing a lightness into her voice that she didn't feel. I didn't sleep well. Martha nodded, her concern evident. You've been working too hard on that cottage of yours. You need to take a break, relax. She gestured towards a small table in the corner of the shop, where a pot of tea and 2 cups were always set out.
Come, sit down.
Have some tea with me. Briar hesitated, then nodded. She sat down at the table, Martha joining her a moment later. Martha poured them both a cup of tea, the fragrant steam rising in the air. So, Martha said, settling back in her chair, what are your plans for the day? Briar took a sip of tea, trying to calm her racing thoughts. I am going for a walk, she said, avoiding Martha's gaze. In the woods. Martha raised an eyebrow. In the woods? Alone? Briar nodded. I need some time to think. Martha's expression shifted, her concern deepening. Briar, is something wrong? You seem different. Briar forced a smile.
Hai fine, Marta.
Really? Just a lot on my mind. Martha studied her for a long moment, her gaze searching. You know you can talk to me, Briar, she said softly. About anything. Briar felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to tell her, to unburden herself, but the words wouldn't come. She couldn't risk the disbelief, the judgment, the pity. Thank you, Martha, she said, her voice choked with emotion. I appreciate that. They sat in silence for a few minutes, sipping their tea. The quiet hum of the bookstore, the gentle rustling of pages, the occasional chime of the bell above the door, created a sense of calm, a stark contrast to the turmoil within Briar. I should go, Briar said finally, standing up. I don't want to keep you from your work. Martha stood up as well, her expression concerned. Promise me you'll be careful, Briar, she said. And come back soon. Briar nodded. I will, she said, knowing that it might be a lie. She hugged Martha, a brief, tight embrace that conveyed more than words ever could. Then, she turned and left the bookstore, stepping back out into the morning sunlight. As she walked away, she felt a pang of sadness, a sense of loss. She was leaving behind the safety and comfort of Whispering Pines, the friendship she had found with Martha, the quiet, ordinary life she had so carefully cultivated. She was stepping into the unknown, into a world of magic and curses, of ancient prophecies and dangerous possibilities. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she couldn't turn back. She had made a choice, a commitment, and she had to see it through, even if it cost her everything. She looked back at the bookstore, at Martha waving from the window, a small, solitary figure in the growing light. Briar waved back, a silent farewell, and then turned and walked towards Black Hollow, her steps determined, her heart filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. The town faded behind her, its sounds and scents replaced by the rustling of leaves, the call of birds, and the growing sense of anticipation that pulsed within her. She was entering his world now, a world of shadows and secrets, and she had no idea what awaited her. Chapter 8. Secrets in the Silverwood. The path to Black Hollow seemed different this time, imbued with a sense of purpose, of inevitability. The morning mist clung to the trees, swirling around her ankles, creating an ethereal, otherworldly atmosphere. The sunlight filtering through the canopy cast dappled shadows on the ground, making the forest floor seem to shift and writhe. Briar walked with a newfound determination, her fear tempered by a growing sense of resolve. She had made a choice, a commitment, and she was going to see it through, no matter the cost. As she approached the ruins, she heard the sound of rushing water. She followed the sound, emerging into a small clearing where a stream flowed through the heart of the Silverwood, its waters crystal clear, reflecting the sunlight like 1,000 tiny diamonds. And there, standing on the bank of the stream, was Alaric. He was different this morning. He wasn't wearing the heavy coat he had worn before. Instead, he wore a simple linen shirt and dark trousers, his sleeves rolled up, revealing strong, tanned forearms. His golden eyes, however, were just as intense, just as captivating, as she remembered. He turned as she approached, a faint smile playing on his lips. You came, he said, his voice low and resonant. Briar nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. I did. He gestured towards the stream. I often come here, he said. It's a place of peace. A refuge from the shadows of the ruins. Briar followed his gaze, looking at the stream, at the way the sunlight danced on the water, at the smooth, moss-covered stones that lined its banks. It was beautiful, undeniably so. A stark contrast to the darkness and decay of Black Hollow. It's lovely, she said, her voice soft. He nodded. Alara loved it here, he said, his voice tinged with sadness. We used to come here often, when things were different. Briar felt a pang of sympathy for him, for the loss he had endured, for the centuries of loneliness he had carried. Tell me more about her, Briar said, her voice barely above a whisper. About Alara. Alaric turned to her, his expression softening. She was everything, he said, his voice choked with emotion. She was beautiful, intelligent, kind, and she had a spirit that could light up the darkest night. He paused, his gaze drifting towards the stream, as if lost in the memories of a distant past. She was a healer, he continued. She had a gift for working with herbs, with the natural world. She could sense things, feel things, that others couldn't. He looked back at Briar, his golden eyes searching hers. She was like you, he said softly.
In a way.
Briar felt a shiver run down her spine. The connection he was drawing between her and Alara, the woman he had loved, the woman who had died to save him, was both unsettling and intriguing. She was from the Shadow Clan, Alaric continued, his voice growing stronger. A rival clan, one that practiced a different kind of magic. A magic that was feared by my people. And yet you loved her, Briar said, her voice barely a whisper. Alaric nodded. Our love was forbidden. But it was also inevitable. We were drawn to each other, like moths to a flame. He paused, his expression shifting, a shadow of anger crossing his features. My brother, Kalen, he couldn't understand it. He saw Alara as a threat, a weakness. He was jealous of our love, of the power she held. He's the one who betrayed you, Briar said, remembering the story Alaric had told her the previous night. Alaric nodded. He plotted with the elders of the Shadow Clan, those who opposed our union, those who feared the merging of our two bloodlines. They devised a ritual, a dark and twisted ritual, to separate us forever. The ritual that went wrong, Briar said, her voice laced with apprehension. Alaric nodded. It was meant to bind Alara to Kalen, to force her to submit to his will. But Alara, she was stronger than they realized. She fought back, she resisted, and in doing so, she unleashed a power that none of them could control. The curse, Briar said, her heart pounding in her chest. Alaric nodded. The curse consumed Black Hollow, trapping everyone within its walls, turning them into shadows. And it transformed me into this. He gestured towards himself, towards his condition. Trapped between worlds, neither fully human nor fully wolf, bound to the ruins, to the memory of my lost love. He looked at Briar, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope. But Alara, before she died, she altered the curse. She created a loophole, a way for it to be broken. She bound her soul to mine, through the ring, and she prophesied that one day, a woman with a similar spirit, a woman with a connection to the earth and a love strong enough to overcome the darkness, would come and set us both free. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. His touch was warm, grounding, and yet it sent a shiver of unease through her. He was telling her more, revealing the depths of his past, the depths of the curse. But he was also drawing her closer, weaving her further into the tapestry of his life, of his tragedy. The stream gurgled beside them, a constant, soothing sound that did little to calm the storm brewing within her. She was walking a tightrope, balanced between fear and a growing, undeniable fascination. Chapter 9. The Hunter's Moon. Alaric led Briar away from the stream, deeper into the silverwood. The trees grew taller here, their branches intertwined, creating a dense canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. The air was cool and damp, filled with the scent of pine and earth. Where are we going? Briar asked, her voice slightly breathless. To a place where we can talk, Alaric replied, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. A place where we can be safe. Briar wasn't sure what he meant by safe, but she followed him, trusting his instincts, his knowledge of this place. She sensed that there were things he wasn't telling her, secrets he was still holding back. They walked in silence for a while, the only sound the rustling of leaves beneath their feet and the occasional call of a bird overhead. Briar noticed that the forest seemed to be watching them. She felt a presence, a sense of awareness, that she couldn't explain. They emerged into a small clearing, bathed in a soft, filtered light. In the center of the clearing stood a circle of stones, ancient and weathered, covered in moss and lichen. It looked like an altar, a place of ritual, of magic. Alaric stopped at the edge of the circle, his gaze fixed on the stones. "This is where it happened," he said, his voice low and somber. "This is where the curse was cast." Briar felt a chill run down her spine. She could sense the residual magic, the lingering energy of the tragedy that had unfolded here centuries ago. It felt heavy, oppressive, like a weight pressing down on her. What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Alaric turned to her, his golden eyes intense. "We prepare," he said. "For the ritual." "The ritual to break the curse," Briar said, her heart pounding in her chest. Alaric nodded. "Tonight is the hunter's moon," he said. "The most powerful full moon of the year. It's the only time when the veil between worlds is thin enough, when the magic is strong enough, to break the curse." "And the sacrifice?" Briar asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alaric hesitated, his expression shifting, a shadow of guilt crossing his features. "I told you," he said, his voice softer now. "It requires a willing heart, a soul that is willing to merge with the magic of the ring, to absorb the darkness and transform it." "And you believe I'm that soul," Briar said, her voice laced with a mixture of doubt and acceptance. Alaric reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers surprisingly warm against her skin. "I do," he said, his voice a low, seductive murmur. "I have seen it in your eyes, in your spirit, in your art." He gestured towards the small bag she carried, where her sketchbook was tucked away. "You have a gift, Briar," he said, "a connection to the unseen world, a power that you may not even realize you possess." Briar felt a shiver run down her spine. She had always felt different, drawn to the forgotten corners of the world, to the places where the veil between the present and the past felt thin. She had always found solace in her art, in the act of creating, of bringing beauty out of darkness. "But what if I'm not strong enough?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if I fail?" Alaric smiled, a faint, reassuring smile. "You won't fail, Briar," he said. "I believe in you. And Alara believed in you too." He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. His touch was warm, grounding, and yet it sent a jolt of electricity through her. "We need to gather the ingredients," he said, "for the ritual. There are certain herbs, certain stones, that we need to collect." He led her around the stone circle, pointing out various plants and rocks, explaining their properties, their significance in the ritual. He spoke of moonflower, a rare and delicate flower that bloomed only under the light of the full moon, its petals said to hold the essence of lunar magic. He spoke of wolfsbane, a poisonous plant that could also be used for protection, its dark leaves representing the shadows that needed to be overcome. He spoke of obsidian, a volcanic glass that could absorb negative energy, its smooth, black surface reflecting the darkness of the curse. As he spoke, Briar listened, absorbing his words, learning the ancient lore, the secrets of this hidden world. She felt a growing sense of connection, not just to Alaric, but to the forest itself, to the magic that flowed through it. They spent the rest of the day gathering the ingredients, moving through the silverwood with a shared purpose, a sense of destiny. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor, they returned to the stone circle, their arms filled with the plants and stones they had collected. The full moon, the hunter's moon, was rising in the east, its silvery light bathing the clearing in an ethereal glow. It was time. The air crackled with anticipation, with magic, with the weight of centuries of waiting. Briar felt a knot of fear in her stomach, but also a sense of excitement. She was about to embark on something extraordinary, something terrifying, something transformative. Alaric's hand found hers again, and he squeezed it gently. A silent reassurance, a silent promise. Or perhaps a silent farewell. Chapter 10. A Pact Made in Darkness. Alaric arranged the gathered ingredients meticulously around the stone circle, each item placed with a precision that spoke of ancient ritual and profound respect. The moonflower, its delicate white petals luminous in the moonlight, was placed at the eastern point of the circle, representing new beginnings and the power of the moon. The wolfsbane, its dark leaves ominous, was placed at the west, symbolizing the shadows to be overcome, the darkness to be conquered. The obsidian, its smooth, black surface reflecting the moonlight, was placed at the north, representing the grounding force of the earth and the absorption of negative energy. Other herbs and stones, each with its own unique properties, were placed at various points around the circle, creating a complex pattern, a web of magic. Briar watched him, her heart pounding in her chest, a mixture of fear and fascination swirling within her. She had never witnessed anything like this before, this ancient ritual, this magic. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Alaric stood in the center of the circle, his golden eyes fixed on the full moon, his expression solemn. He began to chant, his voice low and resonant, the words ancient and unfamiliar, yet somehow familiar. It was a language Briar didn't understand, yet she felt its power, its vibration, resonating deep within her bones. As he chanted, the air around the circle began to shimmer, to thicken, to pulse with energy. The moonlight seemed to intensify, focusing on the stone circle, bathing it in an ethereal glow. Briar felt a tingling sensation on her skin, as if the very air was alive with magic. Alaric raised his hands towards the moon, his voice rising in intensity, the chanting growing faster, more urgent. The silver ring on his left hand, the ring with the dark stone, began to glow, to pulsate with the same ethereal light as the moonflower. He turned to Briar, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of pleading and determination. "It's time," he said, his voice strained. "Are you ready?" Briar hesitated, her mind racing. This was it. The moment of truth. The moment of sacrifice. She looked at Alaric, at his face, etched with centuries of sorrow and hope, at the ring, the symbol of his curse, of his lost love, of his destiny. She thought of her own life, of the quiet, solitary existence she had led, of the losses she had endured, of the emptiness she had felt. She thought of the connection she felt to Alaric, to Alara, to the magic of Black Hollow. She thought of the possibility of transformation, of freedom. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm ready." Alaric nodded, his expression softening. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. His touch was warm, grounding, and yet it sent a shiver of fear through her. He led her into the center of the circle, standing beside him, facing the moon. He began to chant again, his voice blending with the pulsing energy of the ritual. He placed his other hand on her heart, his touch gentle, yet firm. "Repeat after me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The words, they will guide you. They will help you." He began to speak the words, slowly, deliberately, and Briar repeated them, her voice shaky at first, then growing stronger, more confident. The words were strange, unfamiliar, yet they felt right. They resonated deep within her soul, awakening something ancient, something powerful. As they chanted, Briar felt a strange sensation, as if she were melting into the magic, into the moonlight, into Alaric's touch. She felt a tingling warmth spreading through her body, starting at her heart, where Alaric's hand rested, and extending outwards, to her fingertips, to her toes. She looked at Alaric, and she saw Alara. Not physically, but spiritually. She saw a flicker of her in his eyes, in his expression, in his soul. She felt a connection to her, a bond, a shared destiny. The ring on Alaric's hand began to glow brighter, the dark stone pulsating with an intense, almost blinding light. Briar felt a pull, a drawing, towards the ring, towards the magic it contained. She felt a moment of panic, a surge of fear, a desperate desire to pull back. But it was too late. She was caught in the current, in the flow, in the transformation. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the process, to the magic, to the inevitable. She felt a sensation of release, of freedom, of peace. She felt her consciousness expanding, merging with something larger, something ancient, something infinite. She felt the darkness, the pain, the sorrow of the curse, but she also felt the light, the love, the hope of Alara. She felt whole. And then there was nothing. Nothing but light, nothing but peace. The chanting stopped. The pulsing energy subsided. The moonlight dimmed. The ring on Alaric's hand ceased to glow. Alaric stood alone in the center of the circle, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking. He was free. The curse was broken. He looked down at the ring, at the dark stone, which was now clear. Translucent. It held a faint, inner light, a gentle, ethereal glow. He touched the ring, his fingers trembling. He could feel it. Alara's presence. And Briar's. They were there, within the stone, within the magic, within him. He closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. He had paid a heavy price for his freedom. But he was not alone. He carried them with him, their love, their sacrifice, their light. He was no longer the hollow prince. He was something more. A single tear slipped down his cheek and landed on the stone, seeming to be absorbed into its now clear depths. He whispered a thank you, a promise, into the night, the words carried away by the wind, a testament to the pact made in darkness, under the hunter's moon. Chapter 11. The Gathering Storm. The days following the ritual were strange. Alaric moved through the world with a newfound lightness, a sense of freedom he hadn't felt in centuries. He could leave Black Hollow, walk in the sunlight, feel the wind on his face, without the constant, nagging pull of the curse. But he also felt different. He was no longer just Alaric, the Leaken Prince. He was something more. He carried within him the essence of Alara, the love and magic of his lost love, and the spirit of Briar, the woman who had sacrificed everything to set him free. He felt their presence constantly, a gentle warmth within his heart, a whisper of guidance in his mind. He could sense things, feel things, that he hadn't been able to before. He had a heightened awareness of the world around him, of the subtle energies that flowed through all living things. He spent his days exploring the Silverwood, rediscovering the beauty of the forest, the places he and Alara had loved. He visited the stream where he had first met Briar, the stone circle where the ritual had taken place, the ruins of Black Hollow, which no longer felt like a prison, but a sanctuary. He also felt a growing unease, a sense of impending danger. He had broken the curse, yes, but he had also unleashed something. The magic that had been trapped within Black Hollow for centuries was now free. And there were others who would seek to exploit it, to use it for their own dark purposes. He had sensed them, the whispers in the shadows, the fleeting glimpses of movement in the periphery, the growing sense of menace. They were hunters, he knew, those who sought to control or destroy the supernatural, those who feared what they didn't understand. He had to be careful. He had to protect himself, and he had to protect the memory of Alara and Briar. He had to honor their sacrifice. He returned to the cottage, Briar's cottage, which now felt empty. The familiar objects, the symbols of her quiet, solitary life, were still there, but her presence was gone. He picked up her sketchbook, flipping through the pages, his gaze drawn to the drawings of him, of the ruins of the ring. He could feel her spirit in the lines, in the artistry, in the love. He decided to stay in the cottage, to make it his own, a place of refuge, a place of remembrance. He cleaned it, repaired it, made it livable. He brought in some of his own belongings, things he had salvaged from Black Hollow, things that held memories of his past, of his people. He also started to train. He had neglected his Leakin abilities for centuries, trapped in his twilight state, unable to fully shift, unable to access the full power of his heritage. Now, he could feel it returning, the strength, the speed, the heightened senses, the connection to the moon and the earth. He practiced shifting, transforming into his wolf form, running through the forest, feeling the wind in his fur, the earth beneath his paws. It was exhilarating, liberating, but also painful. It reminded him of what he had lost, of what he had been, of what he could never fully be again. He also practiced his magic. He had always had a natural affinity for magic, inherited from his royal lineage, but he had never fully developed it, overshadowed by Alara's more potent abilities. Now, with her essence within him, and Briar's, he felt a surge of power, a connection to the unseen world that was both terrifying and empowering. He learned to control the elements, to summon the wind, to call forth the fire, to manipulate the earth. He learned to heal, to protect, to defend. He knew that the hunters were coming. He could feel it, sense it, in the growing darkness, in the gathering storm. He had to be ready. He had to be strong. He had to fight. For himself, for Alara, for Briar, for the future. He felt a surge of determination, a fierce protectiveness, not just for himself, but for the legacy he now carried. The cottage, once a symbol of quiet solitude, was becoming a fortress, a preparation ground for a battle he knew was inevitable. Chapter 12. Whispers of Betrayal. The first sign of trouble came not from hunters, as Alaric had expected, but from within Whispering Pines. He had ventured into town, needing supplies, needing to connect with the human world, to remind himself of what he was fighting to protect. He had avoided Martha's bookstore, knowing that he couldn't face her, couldn't explain Briar's disappearance. He had gone to the general store, a small, family-run business on the edge of town, where he had purchased food, tools, and other necessities. As he was leaving the store, he overheard a conversation between two men standing near the entrance, their voices low and conspiratorial. "Did you hear about the woman?" One man said, his voice hushed. "The one who disappeared? The artist?" The other man replied, "The one who lived in that old cottage on the outskirts of town?" "Yeah, that's her," the first man said. "They say she went missing a few days ago. Vanished without a trace." "Strange," the second man said. "She seemed like such a quiet, unassuming woman. What do you think happened to her?" "I don't know," the first man said. "But I heard there were rumors. Rumors about her going up to Black Hollow. You know, that cursed place." "Black Hollow?" the second man said, his voice laced with disbelief. "What would she be doing up there?" "I don't know," the first man said. "But they say she was involved with something. Something unnatural." Alaric's heart clenched. He knew they were talking about Briar.
And about him.
The rumors had started, the whispers of suspicion, of fear. He had to be careful. He couldn't let them discover the truth. He quickly left the store, his mind racing. He had to get back to the cottage, to the safety of the Silverwood. He had to think. As he walked, he felt a presence, a sense of being watched. He glanced over his shoulder, but saw nothing but the empty street and the curious gazes of the townspeople. Still, the sensation persisted, a prickling on the back of his neck, a whisper of unease. He reached the edge of town, the trees of the Silverwood looming ahead, offering a sense of refuge. But as he stepped onto the path that led into the forest, he heard a voice, a familiar voice, calling his name. "Alaric." He turned, and his heart sank. It was Martha. She was running towards him, her expression a mixture of concern and accusation. "Alaric," she said, her voice breathless. "I've been looking for you. I need to talk to you. About Briar." Alaric hesitated. He couldn't avoid her. He had to face her, to lie to her. "Martha," he said, forcing a calmness into his voice that he didn't feel. "What is it?" "Where is she, Alaric?" Martha asked, her gaze piercing. "Where is Briar?" Alaric looked away, avoiding her gaze. I don't know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I haven't seen her." Martha's expression hardened. "Don't lie to me, Alaric," she said. I know you were with her. I saw you that night at her cottage." And then she disappeared. Alaric felt a surge of guilt, of shame. He had dragged Briar into this, into his world, into his curse. And now she was gone. "I can't explain," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You can't explain?" Martha repeated, her voice laced with disbelief. "She's my friend, Alaric. My best friend. And you're the last person who saw her. What happened to her?" Alaric took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. He had to protect himself, and he had to protect Briar's memory. He couldn't reveal the truth, not to Martha, not to anyone. She left," he said, his voice strained. "She decided to go away. She didn't tell me where she was going. She just left." Martha stared at him, her eyes filled with sadness and betrayal. "I don't believe you, Alaric," she said softly. "I don't believe you at all." She turned and walked away, her shoulders slumped, her figure disappearing into the crowd of townspeople. Alaric watched her go, his heart aching. He had lost her trust, her friendship. He had betrayed her. He turned and fled into the forest, running towards the cottage, towards the safety of the shadows. He had to get away, to escape the accusing eyes, the whispers of suspicion, the truth. He had made a terrible mistake, coming into town. He had exposed himself, put himself at risk. And he had hurt Martha, the one person in Whispering Pines who had shown him kindness, who had cared about Briar. He reached the cottage, slamming the door behind him, locking it, barring it. He leaned against the door, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his heart pounding in his chest. He was trapped between the hunters, who sought to destroy him, and the townspeople, who suspected him, who feared him. He was alone. Again. The betrayal stung, not just of Martha's trust, but of his own naive belief that he could blend in, that he could find some semblance of normalcy. The walls of the cottage, once a comforting sanctuary, now felt like a cage, closing in on him. The storm was gathering, and he was caught in its center, with no one to trust, nowhere to turn. Chapter 13. The Heart of the Forest. Alaric spent the next few days in a state of heightened alert, his senses on edge, constantly scanning his surroundings for any sign of danger. He knew the hunters were coming, and he knew that Martha's suspicions would likely spread, drawing unwanted attention to him and to the cottage. He decided he needed to move, to find a more secure location, a place where he could hide, where he could prepare. He thought of the stone circle, the place where the curse had been cast, the place where he and Briar had performed the ritual. It was deep within the silverwood, hidden from prying eyes, a place of power, a place of connection. He packed a small bag, taking only the essentials, his sketchbook, a few tools, some food, and the ring, which he now wore on a leather cord around his neck, hidden beneath his shirt. He felt its presence constantly, a gentle warmth against his skin, a reminder of Alara and Briar, of their sacrifice, of their love. He left the cottage before dawn, moving silently through the forest, his leakened senses guiding him, helping him avoid any potential encounters. He moved swiftly, gracefully, like a predator, his eyes scanning the trees, his ears listening for any unusual sounds, his nose testing the air for any unfamiliar scents. He reached the stone circle as the sun was rising, casting long shadows across the clearing, painting the ancient stones with hues of orange and gold. He felt a sense of peace here, a sense of connection. It was as if the forest itself was welcoming him, protecting him. He set up a small camp, a temporary shelter, near the edge of the circle, using branches and leaves to create a makeshift lean-to. He built a small fire, the smoke rising in a thin column, disappearing into the canopy above. He spent the day exploring the area around the circle, familiarizing himself with the terrain, identifying potential escape routes, looking for any signs of the hunters. He found nothing, but he knew they were out there, somewhere, searching for him. As night fell, he sat by the fire, his gaze fixed on the flames, his mind racing. He had to be ready. He had to be strong. He had to fight. He took out his sketchbook, opening it to a blank page. He picked up a pencil, his hand trembling slightly, and began to draw. He drew the stone circle, the ancient stones bathed in moonlight, the shadows stretching long and ominous. He drew the trees, their branches intertwined, creating a dense canopy, a protective shield. He drew himself, standing in the center of the circle, his wolf form emerging, his eyes glowing with a fierce determination. As he drew, he felt a surge of power, a connection to the magic of the forest, to the spirits of Alara and Briar. He felt their presence guiding him, strengthening him, preparing him for what was to come. He heard a rustling in the trees, a snapping of twigs, a whisper of movement. He looked up, his senses on high alert. He saw nothing, but he knew they were here. The hunters had found him. He stood up, his hand reaching for the ring beneath his shirt, his body tensing, preparing to shift, to fight. He felt a surge of adrenaline, of fear, but also of determination. He would not be taken. He would not be defeated.
He would survive.
He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, focusing his mind, channeling his energy, drawing on the power of the forest, of the moon, of the spirits within him. He opened his eyes, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the firelight, his golden eyes glowing with a fierce, primal intensity. He whispered a word, an ancient Lekan word of power, a word of challenge, a word of war. "Show yourselves," he said, his voice low and resonant, echoing through the trees, carrying on the night wind. "I am ready for you." The silence stretched, taut and expectant, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the whisper of the wind in the trees. Then, slowly, figures began to emerge from the shadows, their faces hidden, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. The hunters had arrived. The battle was about to begin. The heart of the forest, once a sanctuary, was now a battleground. And Alaric, no longer the hollow prince, but a warrior forged in loss and love, stood ready to defend it. Chapter 14. A Love Forged in Fire. The hunters emerged from the shadows, 5 of them, clad in dark clothing, their faces obscured by hoods and masks. They carried weapons, crossbows loaded with silver-tipped bolts, swords gleaming in the moonlight, and nets woven with intricate patterns, designed to trap and seduce supernatural creatures. Alaric stood his ground, his body tense, his senses on high alert. He felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the primal instinct to fight, to survive. He gripped the ring beneath his shirt, drawing strength from the spirits of Alara and Briar, feeling their presence guiding him, protecting him. "You are trespassing," Alaric said, his voice low and resonant, echoing through the clearing. "This is sacred ground. Leave now, and you will not be harmed." One of the hunters, a tall, imposing figure who seemed to be the leader, stepped forward. He lowered his hood, revealing a face that was both cruel and familiar. "Kaelin," Alaric breathed, his voice a mixture of disbelief and rage. His brother. The one who had betrayed him, the one who had caused the curse, the one who had stolen his love, his life, his everything. He was alive, and he was leading the hunters. Kaelin smiled, a cold, mocking smile that sent a shiver of disgust down Alaric's spine. "Hello, brother," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's been a long time."
"How?"
Alaric stammered, his mind reeling. "I thought you were dead?" Kaelin finished, his smile widening. "Not quite. The curse had affected me differently."
"It preserved me."
"In a way." He gestured towards the other hunters. "I have been waiting for the right moment, waiting for you to break the curse." "You knew?" Alaric said, his voice laced with fury. "You knew about the prophecy about Briar?" Kaelin nodded. "I have been watching you, Alaric. All these years. I knew that one day you would find a way to free yourself. And I knew that when you did, you would unleash the magic of Black Hollow. And you want it," Alaric said, his voice low and dangerous. "You want the power." Kaelin laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the clearing. "Of course I want the power," he said. "It's my birthright. It's what I was denied all those years ago." "It was never yours," Alaric said, his voice rising in anger. You betrayed our people. You betrayed our love. You betrayed everything. Love? Kaelin scoffed. Love is a weakness, Alaric. A weakness that you and she paid the price for. He gestured towards the ring around Alaric's neck. But now, the power is free. And I will claim it, with or without your help. He raised his hand, signaling to the other hunters. Take him, he said. But be careful. He's stronger than he looks. The hunters moved forward, their weapons raised, their eyes fixed on Alaric. Alaric tensed, preparing to shift, to fight. He felt the familiar surge of power, the transformation beginning, his bones shifting, his muscles rippling, his senses sharpening. But before he could fully transform, Kaelin spoke again, his voice laced with a strange urgency. Wait, he said. There's something you should know, Alaric. Something about the woman. The one who broke the curse. Alaric froze, his transformation halted, his gaze fixed on Kaelin. What about her? He asked, his voice a low growl. Kaelin smiled, a cruel, knowing smile.
She's not gone, Alaric, he said.
Not entirely. Her spirit is trapped. Within the ring. Alaric felt a jolt of hope, of desperation. What do you mean? The ritual, Kaelin said. It didn't just break the curse. It bound her soul to the ring, to the magic.
She's a part of it now.
A source of power. And you can release her? Alaric asked, his voice trembling. Kaelin nodded. With the right knowledge. With the right ritual. I can bring her back, Alaric. I can give you back what you lost. Alaric stared at him, his mind racing. He didn't trust Kaelin. He knew he was lying, manipulating him, but the possibility, the hope of seeing Briar again, of having her back, was too tempting to ignore. This revelation, this twisted offer, was a firestorm igniting within him, a burning conflict between the love he bore for Briar and the hatred he held for his brother. He could almost feel her presence, a flicker of warmth, a whisper of encouragement, coming from the ring. Or was it just his own desperate longing, playing tricks on his mind? Chapter 15. The Price of Freedom. Alaric lowered his defenses, the wolf receding, his human form returning. The hunters, sensing the shift in his demeanor, relaxed their stance, but their weapons remained trained on him, ready to strike at a moment's notice. What do you want, Kaelin? Alaric asked, his voice weary, his heart heavy with a mixture of hope and dread. Kaelin smiled, a triumphant smile that sent a chill down Alaric's spine. I want what is rightfully mine, he said. The power of Black Hollow. The power of the ring. And Briar? Alaric asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What about her? She is the key, Kaelin said. Her spirit, her essence, is bound to the ring. It is the source of its power. With her I can control the magic. I can become unstoppable. You would use her, Alaric said, his voice laced with disgust. You would enslave her spirit. Kaelin shrugged. She made her choice, Alaric. She sacrificed herself to free you. Now, she will serve a greater purpose. I won't let you, Alaric said, his voice rising in anger. I won't let you harm her. Kaelin laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. You have no choice, brother, he said. You are weak. You are sentimental. You are in love. He stepped closer, his gaze fixed on Alaric, his voice dropping to a low, seductive murmur. Join me, Alaric, he said. Together, we can rule. Together, we can harness the power of Black Hollow, the power of the ring, the power of her. He reached out a hand, offering it to Alaric. We can be brothers again, Alaric. We can be powerful. Alaric stared at Kaelin's hand, his mind in turmoil. He hated Kaelin. He despised him for what he had done, for what he was planning to do. But the possibility of seeing Briar again, of having her back, was overwhelming. He looked at the ring, at the faint, ethereal glow emanating from it. He could feel her presence, her spirit, her love. He could almost hear her voice, whispering to him, guiding him. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. He made his decision. I will never join you, he said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. I will never betray her. I will never betray myself. He raised his hand, not to take Kalen's, but to attack. He channeled the magic within him, the power of the forest, of the moon, of Alara and Briar. He unleashed a surge of energy, a blast of wind and fire, that struck Kalen, sending him flying backwards, crashing into the stone circle. The hunters reacted instantly, firing their crossbows, the silver-tipped bolts whizzing through the air towards Alaric. He dodged, weaved, using his Lycan speed and agility to avoid the deadly projectiles. He shifted, his wolf form emerging, his fangs bared, his eyes glowing with a fierce, primal intensity. He attacked, leaping, slashing, biting, using his claws and teeth to tear through the hunter's defenses. He fought with a ferocity he had never known before, fueled by his rage, his grief, his love. He was outnumbered, outgunned, but he was not outmatched. He had the power of the forest on his side, the spirits of Alara and Briar guiding him, protecting him. He fought his way towards Kalen, who was struggling to his feet, his face contorted with pain and fury. He reached him, knocking him to the ground, pinning him beneath his weight. He raised his paw, his claws extended, ready to deliver the final blow. But then he hesitated. He looked into Kalen's eyes, and he saw fear. Fear and regret. He remembered the prophecy, the words that Alara had spoken centuries ago. A woman with a love strong enough to overcome the darkness. He realized that the darkness wasn't just the curse, it wasn't just Kalen, it was within him. The hatred, the rage, the desire for revenge, it was consuming him, blinding him, turning him into the very thing he was fighting against. He lowered his paw, his claws retracting. He couldn't kill Kalen. Not in cold blood. Not like this. I won't kill you, he said, his voice a low growl. But I will stop you. I will protect her. I will protect the balance. He stood up, stepping away from Kalen. He turned to the remaining hunters, who were watching him, their weapons lowered, their expressions a mixture of fear and confusion. Leave this place, he said, his voice commanding, and never return, or you will face the consequences. The hunters hesitated, then slowly backed away, disappearing into the shadows, leaving Alaric and Kalen alone in the clearing. Alaric looked down at Kalen, his expression a mixture of pity and disgust. You are a prisoner of your own darkness, Kalen, he said. And I pity you. He turned and walked away, leaving Kalen lying on the ground, defeated, broken, alone. He walked towards the stone circle, towards the ring, towards Briar. He had won the battle, but the war was far from over. He knew that Kalen would be back, that he would never give up his quest for power. But Alaric was ready. He had found his strength, his purpose, his love. And he would fight, until his last breath, to protect it. He knelt before the circle, placing his hand on the cool stone, feeling the faint pulse of the magic within, a connection to the woman he loved, to the spirit he would never abandon. He had made a choice, a sacrifice of his own, and he would bear the burden, the responsibility, with the strength he had found in the heart of the forest, under the watchful gaze of the moon. Chapter 16. Shadows of the Past. Alaric returned to the cottage, feeling a profound sense of loss. He had spared Kalen's life, but he had also lost the chance, however slim, of bringing Briar back. He knew that Kalen's offer had been a lie, a manipulation, but the hope, the possibility, had been intoxicating. He sat down at the table, his gaze drawn to Briar's sketchbook, which lay open on the surface. He picked it up, flipping through the pages, his fingers tracing the lines of her drawings, feeling her presence, her spirit, in the artistry. He came to a page he hadn't seen before, a drawing that was different. It wasn't of him, or the ruins, or the ring. It was of a woman, a beautiful woman with long, flowing hair and piercing blue eyes. She was wearing a dress that seemed to be made of moonlight, and she was holding a staff, a symbol of power, of magic. Alaric recognized her instantly. Alara. He stared at the drawing, mesmerized. How had Briar known what Alara looked like? He had never described her in detail, never shown her a picture. Had she seen her? In a dream, a vision, a memory? He felt a tingling sensation on his skin, a whisper of connection. He touched the ring, the faint, ethereal glow emanating from it, feeling the presence of Alara and Briar, intertwined, inseparable. He closed his eyes, focusing his mind, channeling his energy, drawing on the power of the ring, of the spirits within. He whispered a word, an ancient Leaken word of seeking, a word of connection. He opened his eyes, and he saw a vision of the past, of Black Hollow, before the curse, before the tragedy. He saw Alara, standing in the stone circle, her hands raised towards the moon, chanting, performing a ritual. He saw Kaelin, watching her, his expression a mixture of jealousy and desire. He saw him approach her, interrupt her, try to control her. He saw Alara resist, fight back, unleash her power, her magic. He saw the curse erupt, consume Black Hollow, transform everything, everyone. He saw Alara, dying, her body fading, her spirit merging with the ring. He saw her whisper a prophecy, a promise, a hope. He saw himself, Alaric, young, strong, full of life, falling to his knees, grief-stricken, his heart broken, his world shattered. The vision faded, leaving Alaric trembling, his heart pounding in his chest, tears streaming down his face. He understood now. He understood the true nature of the curse, the true power of the ring, the true sacrifice of Alara and Briar. They hadn't just broken the curse, they had transformed it. They had woven their love, their spirit, their light, into the darkness, creating something new, something powerful. The ring wasn't just a conduit, it wasn't just a source of magic, it was a vessel of love, of hope, of transformation. He realized that Briar wasn't gone. She was here. Within the ring, within him, within the magic. She was alive in a way, and he could connect with her. He could communicate with her. He stood up, his legs shaky, his heart filled with a renewed sense of purpose. He had to learn how to use the ring, how to harness its power, how to talk to Briar. He went outside, to the small garden behind the cottage, where Briar had planted flowers, herbs, vegetables. He knelt down, touching the earth, feeling the connection to the natural world, to the life force that flowed through all things. He closed his eyes, focusing his mind, channeling his energy, drawing on the power of the ring, of Alara and Briar. He whispered Briar's name, softly, tenderly, lovingly. He felt a warmth, a presence, a response. He opened his eyes, and he saw a flicker of light, a shimmer in the air, a form. It was faint, ethereal, translucent, but it was her, Briar. He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling, touching the form. He felt a jolt of energy, a surge of love, a connection. Briar, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Can you hear me? The form shimmered, flickered, and then a voice. Faint, distant, ethereal, but unmistakably hers. Alaric, she whispered. I'm here. Tears streamed down Alaric's face, tears of joy, of relief, of love. He had found her. He was not alone. The past had revealed its secrets, and the future, however uncertain, held a glimmer of hope, a spark of connection, a testament to the enduring power of love. The garden, once a symbol of Briar's solitary life, now bloomed with a new, unseen beauty, a testament to the magic that connected them across the veil of worlds. Chapter 17. The Unraveling Truth. The connection was fragile, tenuous, like a whisper on the wind. Briar's form flickered, unstable, her voice faint and distant. But she was there. Alaric could feel her presence, her spirit, her love. Briar, he said, his voice trembling with emotion, I thought I had lost you. I'm here, Alaric, she whispered, her voice echoing in his mind, in his soul. I'm within the ring, within the magic. Kaelin, he said, Alaric began, his voice choked with guilt. He said he could bring you back. He lied, Alaric, Briar said, her voice stronger now, more present. He can't bring me back. Not in the way you think. But how? Alaric asked, his mind racing. How is this possible? The ritual, Briar explained, her voice a gentle whisper in his mind. It transformed me. It bound my spirit to the ring, to the magic of Black Hollow. But it also connected me to you.
To Alara.
We are linked, Alaric said, his voice filled with awe. We are one. Yes, Briar said. We are a part of something larger. Something ancient. Something powerful. But can you come back? Alaric asked, his voice pleading. Can you return to your body? Briar hesitated, her form flickering, her voice fading slightly.
I don't know, she said.
I don't think so. Not completely. But I can be with you, Alaric. In this way. I can guide you. I can help you. Alaric felt a surge of hope, of relief. He may not be able to hold her in his arms, to touch her skin, to kiss her lips, but he could be with her. He could love her. What do we do now? He asked, his voice filled with a renewed sense of purpose. We protect the balance, Briar said, her voice firm, her presence strong. We protect the magic of Black Hollow. We protect the world. Kalen Alaric began, his voice laced with anger. He won't give up. He will try to use the ring.
To control the magic.
I know, Briar said. But he can't. Not without me. And I will never let him. We will stop him, Alaric said, his voice determined. Together. Together, Briar echoed, her voice a whisper of love, of hope, of power. Alaric spent the next few days learning to communicate with Briar, to strengthen their connection, to harness the power of the ring. He practiced channeling the magic, drawing on the energy of Alara and Briar, feeling their guidance, their love. He discovered that he could see through Briar's eyes, experience the world through her spirit. He could see the subtle energies that flowed through all living things, the hidden connections, the balance. He learned to control the elements, to summon the wind, to call forth the fire, to manipulate the earth with a precision and power he had never known before. He learned to heal, to protect, to defend, with a grace and skill that surpassed his Leakin abilities. He also learned more about Alara, about her life, her magic, her love for him. He saw her memories, her experiences, her sacrifice. He felt her presence within the ring, intertwined with Briar's, a constant source of strength, of guidance, of love. He realized that the ring wasn't just a vessel, it wasn't just a source of power, it was a connection between two souls, two spirits, two loves, a connection that transcended time, that transcended death, that transcended everything. He knew that Kalen would be coming, that he would try to take the ring, to control the magic, to destroy the balance. But Alaric was ready. He was no longer just Alaric, the Leakin prince. He was something more. He was a conduit, a protector, a lover. He was the guardian of the ring, the guardian of Black Hollow, the guardian of Briar and Alara. And he would fight, until his last breath, to protect them, to protect the world, to protect the love that bound them together. He stood in the garden, the faint outline of Briar shimmering beside him, a silent promise, a shared destiny. The truth had been revealed, the path was clear, and the battle, he knew, was far from over. Chapter 18. The Edge of Forever. Days turned into weeks, and the sense of impending confrontation grew stronger. Alaric continued to hone his skills, practicing his Leakin abilities, his magic, and his communication with Briar and Alara. He felt their presence constantly, a source of strength, guidance, and love. He had fortified the cottage, creating wards and protections, using his knowledge of Leakin lore and the magic he now wielded. He had also explored the Silverwood, mapping out the terrain, identifying strategic locations, preparing for any eventuality. He knew that Kalen would be coming, and he knew that he wouldn't be coming alone. He had sensed the hunters gathering, their numbers growing, their presence a dark shadow looming over Black Hollow. He also felt a growing unease, a sense of urgency. He knew that the balance was shifting, that the veil between worlds was thinning, that the magic of Black Hollow was becoming unstable. He needed to find a way to secure the magic, to protect it from falling into the wrong hands, to prevent Kalen from unleashing its full power. He consulted with Briar and Alara, seeking their guidance, their wisdom, their knowledge. They revealed to him the existence of a hidden chamber, a secret place within Black Hollow, where the ancient lichens had stored their most powerful artifacts, their most sacred texts, their most dangerous secrets. They told him that the chamber held a key to controlling the magic of Black Hollow, a key to sealing the veil, a key to restoring the balance. They also warned him that the chamber was protected, guarded by ancient spells, by powerful wards, by tests. Tests of strength, tests of courage, tests of love. Alaric knew that he had to go to the chamber, that he had to retrieve the key, that he had to face the tests. He knew that it was the only way to protect the magic, to protect Briar and Alara, to protect the world. He prepared for his journey, gathering his supplies, his weapons, his resolve. He spent one last night in the cottage, with Briar's ethereal form shimmering beside him, their connection stronger than ever, their love a beacon in the darkness. "Are you ready?" Briar whispered, her voice a gentle presence in his mind. "Yes," Alaric said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. "I am." "Be careful, Alaric," Briar said. "The chamber, it's dangerous. The tests, they're not easy." "I know," Alaric said, "but I will face them.
For you. For Alara.
For us. We will be with you," Briar said. "Always." Alaric touched the ring, the faint, ethereal glow emanating from it, feeling the warmth of Briar and Alara's presence, their love, their strength. He left the cottage before dawn, moving silently through the forest, his lichen senses guiding him, leading him towards Black Hollow, towards the hidden chamber, towards his destiny. He reached the ruins as the sun was rising, casting long shadows across the crumbling walls, the shattered archways, the forgotten memories. He felt a sense of foreboding, a sense of anticipation. He entered the ruins, his steps echoing through the silent chambers, the empty corridors, the haunted spaces. He felt the presence of the past, the echoes of the curse, the whispers of the dead. He followed Briar and Alara's guidance, their voices whispering in his mind, leading him through the labyrinthine passages, the hidden doorways, the secret paths. He reached a wall, a seemingly solid wall of stone, with no visible opening, no visible entrance. He touched the wall, feeling the cold, rough surface, the ancient magic. He closed his eyes, focusing his mind, channeling his energy, drawing on the power of the ring, of Briar and Alara. He whispered a word, an ancient lichen word of opening, a word of passage. The wall shimmered, flickered, and then dissolved. A doorway appeared, a dark, narrow opening, leading into the unknown. Alaric took a deep breath, steeling himself. He stepped through the doorway, entering the hidden chamber, entering the heart of Black Hollow. He felt the weight of centuries, the power of ancient magic, the presence of the guardians. The edge of forever beckoned, a threshold between worlds, between life and death, between hope and despair. And Alaric, armed with love and guided by the spirits of the women he cherished, stepped forward, ready to face whatever awaited him. Chapter 19. A choice between worlds. The hidden chamber was unlike anything Alaric had ever seen. It wasn't a dusty, crumbling ruin like the rest of Black Hollow. It was alive. The walls were made of a shimmering, crystalline material that pulsed with a faint, ethereal light. The air was thick with magic, crackling with energy, humming with power. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and on the pedestal rested the key. It wasn't a physical key, made of metal or stone. It was a crystal, a large, multifaceted crystal that glowed with an intense, inner light, shifting colors, swirling with energy, radiating power. Alaric approached the pedestal, his heart pounding in his chest, his senses on high alert. He felt the presence of the guardians, the ancient spirits that protected the chamber, watching him, testing him, judging him. He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling, towards the crystal. But before he could touch it, a voice echoed through the chamber, a powerful, ancient voice, filled with authority. "Halt," the voice commanded. "You are not worthy." Alaric froze, his hand hovering above the crystal. He looked around, but he saw no one. The voice seemed to come from everywhere, from nowhere, from within.
Who are you?
Alaric asked, his voice echoing through the chamber. We are the guardians, the voice replied. The protectors of this chamber. The keepers of the key. I seek the key, Alaric said, his voice firm. To protect the magic of Black Hollow. To restore the balance. Your intentions are unclear, the voice said. Your heart is divided. You seek power, but you also seek love. I seek to protect what is precious, Alaric said. To honor the sacrifice of those who came before me. Prove it, the voice commanded. Face the tests. Prove your worthiness. Suddenly, the chamber began to shift. The walls shimmered, flickered, and then transformed. Alaric found himself standing in a different place, a different time. He was in the Silverwood, but it was different. It was before the curse, before the tragedy. He saw himself, young, strong, full of life, walking through the forest, hand in hand with Alara. He saw their love, their joy, their happiness. He felt their connection, their bond, their destiny. He saw Kaelin, watching them, his expression filled with jealousy, with hatred. He saw him plot, scheme, betray. He saw the ritual, the curse, the tragedy. He felt Alara's pain, her sacrifice, her love. The vision faded, and Alaric found himself back in the chamber, his heart aching, his eyes filled with tears. The first test, the voice said. The test of memory. You have passed. The chamber shifted again, and Alaric found himself in another place. He was in the cottage, Briar's cottage, but it was different. It was filled with light, with warmth, with life. He saw Briar, standing before him, not as an ethereal form, but real. Flesh and blood, alive, beautiful. He reached out to her, his fingers trembling, touching her skin, feeling her warmth, her love. Briar, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. You're here. Briar smiled, a radiant smile that filled his heart with joy. Yes, Alaric, she said. I'm here.
But how?
Alaric asked, his mind reeling. The key, Briar said. It can bring me back. It can restore everything. We can be together, Alaric. Forever. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. Her touch was warm, real, perfect. All you have to do, she said, is take the key, claim its power, and we can be together. Always. Alaric looked at the key, at the crystal, glowing with an intense, inner light. He looked at Briar, at her beautiful face, her loving eyes, her promise. He hesitated. He knew it was a test, a temptation, an illusion. But it was so real, so perfect. He wanted it so badly. To be with her, to hold her, to love her. He closed his eyes, focusing his mind, channeling his energy, drawing on the power of the ring, of Alara and the true Briar. He opened his eyes, and he saw the truth. The illusion shattered, and he saw Briar, her ethereal form, standing beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder, her presence a source of strength, of guidance, of love. He looked at the false Briar, and he saw Shadow, a creature of magic, a guardian of the chamber, testing him, tempting him. I will not betray her, Alaric said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. I will not betray myself. The shadow faded, and Alaric found himself back in the chamber, the crystal key glowing before him. The second test, the voice said. The test of temptation. You have passed. The chamber shifted one last time, and Alaric found himself standing before a choice. Two paths, diverging before him, leading to different futures. One path was bright, filled with light, with warmth, with happiness. He saw himself, standing with Briar, fully restored, fully alive, their love strong, their future secure. The other path was dark, filled with shadows, with uncertainty. He saw himself, alone, burdened by responsibility, fighting a never-ending battle, protecting the magic, protecting the world. The final test, the voice said. The test of choice. Choose wisely, Alaric. Your destiny and the destiny of others hangs in the balance. Alaric looked at the two paths, his heart torn, his mind racing. He wanted to choose the light, to choose happiness, to choose Briar. But he knew that he couldn't. He had a responsibility, a duty, a purpose. He had to protect the magic, to protect the balance, to protect the world. Even if it meant sacrificing his own happiness, his own love. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. He made his choice. He stepped onto the dark path, the path of shadows, the path of uncertainty, the path of sacrifice. The chamber shimmered, flickered, and then returned to its original form. The crystal key glowed before him, waiting for him, ready for him. You have passed the tests, the voice said. You are worthy. Take the key, Alaric, and fulfill your destiny. Alaric reached out and took the key, the crystal warm in his hand, pulsing with power, humming with magic. He had made his choice. He had chosen duty over desire, responsibility over happiness, sacrifice over love. But he knew, deep in his heart, that it was the right choice. He had honored Briar's sacrifice, Alara's sacrifice, his own sacrifice. And he would continue to fight, to protect, to love until his last breath. He held the key, the weight of the world, the weight of his choice heavy in his hand. But he was not alone. He felt Briar and Alara, their presence a constant source of strength, of guidance, of unconditional love. Chapter 20. The Final Confrontation of Hearts. Alaric emerged from the hidden chamber, the crystal key clutched tightly in his hand. He felt its power, its magic, coursing through him, connecting him to Black Hollow, to the Silverwood, to the world. He knew that Kaelin was coming, that he would be waiting for him, that he would try to take the key, to unleash the magic, to destroy the balance. He was right. As he stepped out of the ruins, he saw him. Kaelin, standing in the clearing, surrounded by hunters, their weapons drawn, their eyes fixed on Alaric, on the key. I knew you would come, Kaelin said, his voice cold, his expression a mixture of triumph and fury. I knew you would seek the key. It's over, Kaelin, Alaric said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. I have the key, and I will not let you use it. Kaelin laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed through the clearing. You think you can stop me? He said. You are weak, Alaric. You are sentimental. You are alone. I am not alone, Alaric said, his voice rising in power. He raised his hand, showing the crystal key, its light pulsing, its magic alive. I have the power of Black Hollow. I have the spirits of Alara and Briar with me. And I have the will to fight. Kaelin's expression shifted, a flicker of fear crossing his features. But he quickly regained his composure, his arrogance returning. It doesn't matter, he said. I have the numbers. I have the weapons. And I have the knowledge. He gestured towards the hunters. Take him, he said. And bring me the key. The hunters moved forward, their crossbows raised, their swords gleaming in the sunlight. Alaric tensed, preparing to fight, preparing to defend. But before the battle could begin, a voice echoed through the clearing, a familiar voice, a powerful voice, a loving voice. Stop, Briar said. The hunters froze, their movements halted, their eyes wide with confusion. They looked around, searching for the source of the voice, but they saw nothing. Alaric smiled, a faint, knowing smile. He knew. Briar and Alara were with him, their spirit strong, their magic powerful. He raised the crystal key, focusing his mind, channeling his energy, drawing on the power of the ring, of Briar and Alara. He whispered a word, an ancient Leaken word of binding, a word of protection. A wave of energy erupted from the key, a shimmering, ethereal wave that washed over the clearing, enveloping the hunters, binding them, immobilizing them. They struggled, they fought, but they could not move. They were trapped, prisoners of the magic, of the love. Kaelin stared in disbelief, his eyes filled with rage and terror. What have you done? He stammered. I have protected what is precious, Alaric said, his voice calm, his gaze unwavering. I have honored the sacrifice of those who came before me. He walked towards Kaelin, the crystal key held before him, its light shining brightly, its magic flowing. It's over, Kaelin, Alaric said. Your quest for power is at an end. Kaelin snarled, his face contorted with fury. I will never give up, he said. I will find a way. I will destroy you. You cannot destroy what you do not understand, Alaric said. You cannot defeat love. He reached out and touched Kaelin's forehead with the crystal key. A surge of energy flowed from the key into Kaelin, through him, cleansing him, purifying him. Kaelin screamed, his body convulsing, his eyes filled with pain. But then, slowly, the screaming stopped, the convulsions ceased, the pain faded. He looked at Alaric, his expression different. He was no longer filled with rage, with hatred, with ambition. He was calm. He was peaceful. Brother, he said, his voice soft, his eyes filled with regret.
I'm sorry.
Alaric nodded, his heart aching for Kaelin, for the brother he had lost, for the brother he had found. It's over, Kaelin, Alaric said. It's finally over. He turned to the hunters, who were still immobilized, their expressions a mixture of fear and confusion. He raised the crystal key, focusing his mind, channeling his energy, drawing on the power of Briar and Alara. He whispered a word, an ancient Lecan word of release, a word of freedom. The energy wave dissipated, and the hunters were free. They stumbled, they looked around, they remembered. They lowered their weapons, their eyes filled with shame and remorse. They had been manipulated, controlled, used by Kaelin. But now they were free. Alaric looked at them, his expression compassionate.
Go, he said.
Return to your lives. And never forget what happened here. The hunters nodded, slowly backing away, disappearing into the forest, leaving Alaric and Kaelin alone in the clearing. Alaric turned back to Kaelin, his heart filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. What will you do now? Alaric asked. Kaelin looked around, at the ruins of Black Hollow, at the Silverwood, at the world. I will try to make amends, he said. I will try to heal. I will try to live. Alaric nodded. I will help you, he said. We will rebuild. Together. The final confrontation had not been of weapons, but of hearts. The power of love, of forgiveness, of redemption, had triumphed over darkness, over hatred, over ambition. Alaric stood with his brother, the crystal key warm in his hand, the spirits of Briar and Alara a constant presence, a guiding light. The battle was over. The healing could begin. Epilogue. Years passed. Black Hollow slowly began to heal. The ruins, once a symbol of darkness and despair, became a place of remembrance, a testament to the enduring power of love, of sacrifice, of redemption. Alaric and Kaelin worked together, rebuilding the community, restoring the balance, honoring the memory of Alara and Briar. They used the crystal key, not for power, not for control, but for healing. They mended the veil between worlds, secured the magic of Black Hollow, and created a sanctuary, a place of peace, a place of hope. Alaric never forgot Briar. He felt her presence constantly, within the ring, within the magic, within his heart. He could communicate with her, with Alara, their spirits intertwined, their love a beacon in the darkness. They weren't physically together, but they were connected. They were one. And that was enough. Martha, after a long period of grief and confusion, eventually came to understand. Alaric told her the truth, as much of it as she could comprehend, and she accepted it. She saw the change in Alaric, the peace in his eyes, the strength in his spirit. She saw the healing of Black Hollow, the return of life to the Silverwood, the magic. She became a part of their community, a friend, a confidant, a keeper of the story. She understood that Briar, though gone from the physical world, was still present, still loved. The cottage, Briar's cottage, became a memorial, a place of remembrance, a place of connection. Alaric kept it as it was, filled with Briar's drawings, her books, her memories. He often sat there in the quiet evenings, feeling her presence, talking to her, sharing his thoughts, his feelings, his love. The Silverwood flourished, becoming a haven for all creatures, both natural and supernatural. The lichens returned, slowly, cautiously, rebuilding their lives, learning to live in harmony with the humans, with the world. Alaric and Kaelin, once enemies, became brothers again. They ruled together, not as kings, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Guardians of Black Hollow, guardians of the Silverwood, guardians of the balance. One day, many years later, Alaric stood in the stone circle, the place where it had all begun, the place where he had made his choice, the place where he had found his destiny. He was old now, his hair silver, his body frail, but his spirit strong. He held the crystal key in his hand, feeling its warmth, its magic, its love. He looked up at the full moon, the hunter's moon, shining brightly in the night sky, bathing the clearing in an ethereal glow. He felt Briar's presence beside him, Alara's presence within him, their love a constant source of strength, of guidance, of peace. He smiled, a faint, knowing smile. He knew that his time was near. He was ready. He had lived a long life, a full life, a life filled with love and loss, with sacrifice and redemption. He closed his eyes, focusing his mind, channeling his energy, drawing on the power of the ring, of Briar and Alara. He whispered a word, an ancient Lichen word of farewell, a word of union. He felt a warmth, a light, a release. He felt his body fading, his spirit soaring, his soul merging. He was no longer Alaric, the Lichen prince, the guardian of Black Hollow. He was something more. He was one with Briar, one with Alara, one with the magic. He was free. The crystal key fell to the ground, its light dimming, its magic dormant. But the love, the sacrifice, the legacy, remained. Etched in the stones, whispered in the wind, carried in the hearts of those who remembered. The Hollow Prince was gone, but his spirit, and the spirits of the women he loved, lived on, forever bound, forever free, in the heart of the Silverwood, under the watchful gaze of the moon. Black Hollow was no longer hollow. It was filled with love, with memory, with hope. The end.